magnificent, glorious day. It was the sun. It was like one of those great fall days where it's crisp and clear and the sun is shining. And I was going down to the Berkeley Heights in Ocean County Senior Citizens Club meeting, and got on 1 and 9, drove onto the Parkway, went down over the bridge into Berkeley Heights, where there was a minion of Democrats. And basically, I remember I was doing the presentation on Medicaid, on Social Security, on healthcare, on some of the senior issues, living wills, nursing home costs. And I remember that there were some seniors, there was a large flat screen TV outside of the room, the banquet room where I was speaking, and some people were watching it. And then they sort of ran into the room and they sort of called and they said, come out, look at this, there's been an accident. And a number of us went out, and some people obviously continued, eating, some of the folks. But I went out there, and you saw that the first plane had hit. And I remember just like not comprehending how a plane could accidentally, what I at that point in time presumed it was accidental, how it could hit the Twin Towers. And then, some people prayed, some people talked. It was sort of confusion. And I remember, I was mayor of the township of Woodbridge. And thinking back that obviously Woodbridge, which is in close proximity to Staten Island, and also we had all these reciprocal agreements with the city of New York for first responders, thinking I had better get back. And so basically I walked into the room and I just said, obviously there's this emergency and I'm terribly sorry. And I remember sort of getting into my car and this sort of feeling of dread, feeling of sadness. And then when I was in my car, when I was listening to the radio, the second attack happened. And I remember the first thing I did is I went back to Woodbridge, and my church, St. James in Woodbridge, is at the end of Main Street. And for whatever reason, I walked in there, and the church was always open, and I just lit a candle and prayed, because there was nothing that I could do in terms of emergency response, but I just wanted to gather my thinking to be, for lack of a better term, grounded. And then I drove down the block to the mayor's office and saw the chief of police. And with the chief of police, Chief Bill Trenery, and Deputy Chief Phil DiNicola, began to coordinate and provide backup. And I remember during the course of the day, Shell, going up to Liberty State Park, which was directly across the river from, literally you could see the buildings. And all of us, this is over the course of hours, thought there were going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of people coming to Jersey for hospitalization, for healthcare. And Mayor Giuliani was mayor at the time, and there was great coordination between Cornell University Hospital, NYU, Jersey City Medical Center, and Long Island Jewish, and they were basically trying to focus or coordinate all of the hospitals, because what we thought this was going to be was largely a healthcare emergency response to all of these people. And I just remember just waiting, and it was surreal. And just waiting and waiting, and we thought there were going to be boats. We had visions in our own mind that it was almost going to be like an evacuation. You think of Dunkirk, or you think of just people leaving, and it never came. And there was in my memory, there was on Liberty State Park, there was a big board that the state police had gotten there, and they were tremendous. I mean, like, I just lovely. Can't say enough positive about the state police, because it's Office of Emergency Management, communications, state police, coordinate with other police departments, coordinate with the city of New York, coordinate with local police departments, coordinate with the FBI. One of the most human things they did is there was this big board. And so what happened was is people who had heard from their sons or their daughters or their loved ones didn't know where to go. And there was this big board with notes. And I can remember as it were yesterday now. And people had boards like, Johnny or Sally or so-and-so. And I think a lot, talking to the people there, I mean, obviously everybody was filled with a sense of hope that their loved ones hadn't died, and that maybe they were dazed and maybe they were confused. And I just remember being there really incredibly late. And then the next morning, the Jersey City Fire Department took me over on a barge to what was left in the rubble. And, we were there helping. I think we were more in the way than, the firemen were great. I'm talking about myself, but people were moving rubble and whatever, and they were dropping listening devices down into the rubble trying to hear. And occasionally they would find someone, not someone who from the original building, but an emergency responder or somebody who literally had gone into the building or had gone into the rubble, and subsequent rubble had come. And for me, it became really, there was a wonderful woman in the First Baptist Church of Woodbridge, whose daughter had just gotten a job about maybe 60 days before in the building, and she was just a great kid and just whatever. And this mother called me and said this was her only child. Her husband had died, and she was, she psychologically, spiritually invested everything into her daughter. And she said to me, Jimmy, she goes, I know she's okay, and I know she's alive and whatever. And she goes, will you meet me? And I said, of course. And so she put up the sign on that board, who her daughter is, if you find her, whatever. And it was just, and then like in the days, literally in the weeks subsequent, we went into New York and we put signs in New York, and I had called, the state police, and I had called people that I knew through Woodbridge Police Department, and there was no unexpected, but this mother had like this deep abiding faith, and she wasn't to find her daughter. And I just sort of remember that day being filled, and the days after, being filled with such pain and being filled with such loss. There were great examples of caring and love and decency. But for the people who lost that day, people that I knew from the Port Authority police, people that I saw the week before, people that I knew through just life in New Jersey, it was inexplicable. And I just remember years later when when we were like designing the 9/11 memorial and just meeting, and a dear friend of mine, Joe Russo, who lost loved ones, and people trying to make sense of that loss or trying to bring closure. And I think the memorial helped in some small way. For that mother, they eventually found belongings of her daughter, although nothing of her daughter. But God bless the police, and God bless the individuals that were combing through. I mean, so for me, when you think back at 9/11, I think about the state police, I think about the firemen, I think about the policemen, I think about Father Michael Judd, I think about all the people who ran into the building. One guy I know literally drove from his home in Ocean County all the way up and, gave his life. And so that day is just, is a very vivid reminder of the sacrifice, of the courage, of the heroics of people who wear a uniform and keep us safe every day. And so I haven't thought about this in a long time, but for that mother, I mean, she never changed her daughter's bedroom. She kept the bedroom the way it always was. And so to think about what that ache, what that pain was, in my own sort of awkward way, I said, well, she was a gift while we had her, and a gift while you had her. But to be cut short that quickly, it's a pain that didn't have much reason. It's a suffering that it ached. It wasn't like a loss in the normal course of life. So for me, it was just a constant reminder of how grateful. A couple of years later, when we had a terroristic threat about one of the tunnels, I think it was the Holland Tunnel, and it was Christmas or New Year's, and I remember going up there to the state police and they were concerned that an ambulance was going to be driving through the tunnel and it was going to be filled with some type of gas and it was going to explode. And I remember going up there and bringing some sandwiches and thinking to myself, like, I'm going to be here for an hour handing out some sandwiches and I get to go home. These guys, wearing this blue and gold are here, for the next 24 hours. So for all those families that suffered loss, it's painful, it's prayer. Loss is always hard, but such destructive loss. And for all those individuals who are willing to put themselves in harm's way, it's one thing to read about it, it's another thing to see it and to taste it and to see those families with those posting those signs, to see those state troopers, to see those firemen like cleaning rubble. I mean, it seared my memory.
You were at the time, as you mentioned, the mayor of Woodbridge, but you were campaigning successfully, as it turns out, to become the next governor of New Jersey, which you were sworn in months later. What was that like for you? What was going through your head? Because we were all concerned at the time of another attack.
Yeah. Shel, what you realize is, one, you're grateful for the FBI. I mean, like a one-man band, grateful for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, grateful for the U.S. Attorney's Office, for the Department of Justice. I mean, the price of vigilance, the price of freedom is vigilance. And people need to understand that, you know, while we enjoy the many gifts that this democracy and this great country gives to all of us, there are people that would harm our way of life. There are people, domestic and foreign, who don't believe in how our country operates and organizes, and so it's just, I mean, so working closely with police department, with the Attorney General, with the FBI, and to give credit where credit is due. I mean, President Bush, um, uh, Bush 43, and I was a big fan of his father's as well. Um, and then, you know, Governor Kane, who was governor of the state of New Jersey, and John Farmer, they participated in something called the 9/11 Commission, and sort of looked at the lessons learned, looked at where there might have been failure of intelligence. You know, you had the FBI, you had the CIA, you know, where there was intelligence. So in that particular case, you know, the CIA is looking at foreign intelligence, but what was shared domestically with the federal, with the Bureau, gaps in knowledge, gaps in how to synthesize that knowledge, how to make sense. I mean, so obviously we're a nation of laws. We value our civil liberties, and Americans are protect those civil liberties robustly. But other nations, whether you're looking in Europe and you look at Asia, you look at the Middle East, understand we've had the luxury as a country of, with the exception of the Civil War and the War of 1812, not to have had a war ravaging the continent. Other countries, I think, are much more acutely aware of threats, both foreign and domestic. And so what I recognize is the importance of having strong intelligence. And I think that's something that presidents, whether you look at President Obama, if you look at President Bush, they've all understood the importance of having that robust intelligence network and balancing that. And it's a difficult balancing act against American civil liberties.
That day changed everybody's life, but I'm thinking of you campaigning for governor. What was the shift
Oh,
from
yeah.
9/10 to 9/11? What was going through your head? I mean, the whole world changed.
The whole world changed. I mean, one is just shell. It's a really great question. So you're out there, like, you know, running all over the state in your Chevy and you know, campaigning for governor. But then you understand that you understand that what it means, and I guess as importantly, what it doesn't mean, because you begin to focus very directly and immediately on this terrible loss of life. To go to what you just said, the vulnerability, the possibility of another attack. Does this come again and again? And that concern. So for us in Woodbridge, Woodbridge is 100,000 people. There were a number of people who died in the World Trade Center. And, you know, people take the train from Metro Park, from Avenel, from the Woodbridge train station into the city. So I guess there were a couple of things. One is your focus comes immediately right back to human beings, to fathers, and brothers, and mothers that were missing in your hometown, and people struggling to make sense of it, people struggling who hadn't heard from their loved ones. Second, after that very human focus, as a mayor, you want to be supportive with your police department, for NYPD, for your fire department, and Woodbridge has, you know, our fire departments, our police department, we're all tremendously supportive. And then third is, you know, as a citizen of New Jersey, as a citizen of the tri-state area, to try to understand. And because I was running for governor, I think the state police were probably more generous because they gave us briefings as to what was occurring and what they knew. And that's why, when we talk about the strength of American democracy from administration to administration, administrations, one of the great strengths is that the state police are there. The FBI is there. The CIA is there. The Department of Justice is there. That we are a nation of laws and not, what we traditionally would say men or individuals, that organizational structure, that intelligent network is there, and it's so important. So I think it was focusing on a real human level. People, I mean, Woodbridge, I was mayor for 11 years. I knew every block and like literally almost every family, or I thought I did. It was our police, our fire department, our emergency response, and being supportive of New York, even though we thought this great exodus of injured persons were coming. Then it became a question of, well, how do we move to grapple with the destruction and look for those injured persons? I knew firemen that literally were there for months, and because of that became critically ill. And then it was just understanding that long term, we had to strengthen. You think of, all right, the New York, when you're going through the Holland Tunnel, I remember as a kid, oh, there's the line, there's Jersey and there's New York. And, we'd look at the tunnel and, whatever. And there was, I think it's a blue line. But those lines were erased in 9/11. I mean, just like the tunnel, we used to think of kids when we were going off the GW Bridge, oh, the line must be in the river. I think it's on that side or that side. Well, I mean, those are the notions you learn when you're like in third or fourth grade about this state and that state. But, 9/11 just realized how, I don't want to say silly, but irrelevant those lines are to terrorism, and to understand the need to have a regional, national network of intelligence gathering and diligence in pursuing. And then it's also, I mean, Shelley, it's a human exercise. When Governor Kane and the 9/11 Commission, and they looked at, maybe perhaps breakdowns in intelligence, but people, their framework at that time was, Russia is here and the United States is here, democracy is here, communism is here. I mean, there wasn't the sense of Al-Qaeda. I mean, that wasn't the mindset. And I think so much has changed in the sense of how do we understand non-state supported terrorism and state supported interference. So it's understanding that they're human judgments, understanding sharing information, but is there a downside to sharing too much? Yeah, possibly. So it was just developing systems, having critical thinking, and having third-party objective review to make sure those decisions were valid.
Anything else you'd like to add?
For me that day will probably always be about, remember President Bush with the bullhorn and on top of a rubble. For me, it was also people really looking for meaning and safe places and spirituality and loss. I think maybe what it said to me, Shell, is that it's having a sense, hopefully just for me personally, having a sense to a higher set of standards, and higher, I mean, a spiritual set of standards, trying to, over the years, when you reflect back on that day, that's why I love the work I do now. It's changing one person at a time, but there's so often times in life we may not understand what has happened, but trying to be open to do the next right thing. For me, trying to be, there's a great expression that one of the ancient rabbis said, the cracks in the vase are where God's grace comes through. There was after 9/11, we were kinder to each other. We held each other. We understood the fragility of life. We realized we weren't as powerful as we thought we were, in the sense of the individual. And we also understood a shared responsibility to care for the other, the wounded, the dead, the grieving. So I guess that's my takeaway. This is more painful than I ever thought it would be.
I'm sorry. Yeah, yes, I'm sorry.
Like all this emotion comes back, but
I
but
know.
thank you for doing this.
Well,
This is
thank
really
you.
important.
Yes.
It's funny. It's because when you're governor, when the 9/11 museum opened, this sounds nuts. I haven't got. I mean, I've seen I've gone to the site, but I haven't gone into the museum. But I think I will now. It's just because all of these these notions and what you remember and human beings and whatever. But anyway, thank you.
Well, thank you.